Good afternoon and welcome to August 25th Civil Service Commission meeting. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine.
Here.
Gregorian.
Yes.
Yantis.
Yes.
Manukian.
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Coleman is absent.
What's next?
I guess technically he's still.
Minutes.
Move for approval without reading.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine.
Yes.
Gregorian. Yes. Yantis.
Yes.
Manukian.
Yes. What's next?
Oral communications.
Okay, I don't have any cards. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak? I see none. Go to the next item, please.
Eligible list established.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, before you are the eligible lists that have been established since our last meeting 2 weeks ago. As you know, one of those lists was a reinstatement list, which came up at the previous meeting. The second list is an open list on revenue manager for the Finance Department. That was a open recruitment process which yielded 78 applications, and at the conclusion of our process, we ended up with 5 individuals on our eligibility list. That's the sum and substance of that report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions, gentlemen? I see none. Let's go to the next item.
Presentation of the Reserve Police Officer Program.
All right. Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, we're very proud and honored to have representatives from the Glendale Police Department Reserve Program. This was actually an idea that Chairman Manukian came up with to recognize a very important element within our police department and the service that they provide, and introduce them before the Commission. So we do have, I believe, 6 members of our Reserve Corps, along with Chief DePompa and Sergeant Kevin Dizon, who is the coordinator. So, Chief DePompa.
Chief, welcome.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Mr. Chair and members of Commission. We're very pleased to have this opportunity to introduce some of our reserve staff to you. But if I might just give a little preamble and let you know that the reserve officers who are strictly volunteers, they do much to help us bridge the gap in terms of our resources. As you're well aware, the last 2 fiscal years have been hard on the not only the entire city but the police department as well, where we have lost 17 full-time sworn officer positions as a result of budget reductions. And that makes it extremely hard for us to police a city the size of Glendale with the level of staffing that we have. Fortunately, we have dedicated individuals in the community that like to give back and have chosen the path of being a reserve officer, and they do a tremendous amount in terms of helping us meet the service demands in the community. They, as you see, and we'll see soon, they wear the same uniform, they display the same badge, they essentially complete the same level of training that the regular officers do, albeit over an extended period of time. And then they're there to augment our forces, whether it be riding a patrol car or staffing a special event or assisting our investigators investigating crimes that occur within the city. And they do it all on a voluntary basis. So they are truly special individuals. And we're honored to have an opportunity to introduce them to you today. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce Sergeant Kevin Dizon, who has been our reserve coordinator for the last several years. And he would like to give you a little more insight into the program and then individually introduce the reserve officers that we have here today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I'm Sergeant Dizon with the Glendale Police Department, and I've been the reserve coordinator for the last 3.5 years. I have the best group of reserves, I think, around in this state. And the ones I have here today range from brand new, starting in June, all the way up to 33 years on the force as a reserve here. reserves, as the chief had mentioned, are complete volunteers, and that's why I was only able to get 4. Many of them are working full-time, or are full-time students, and have other obligations. They donate, on average, about 4,000 hours. And as of June, we doubled our forces to 14 reserves. So with just 7, those 7 were averaging about 4,000 hours for the last 3 years. It's a tremendous workload for these gentlemen. And as I said, in June, we doubled that to 14. We also have them working in numerous parts of the department other than patrol. One, our 33-year veteran, Bill Torley, I'll bring up shortly, he dedicates his time and has been an instructor at the Reserve Academy at the Sheriff's Department for 30 years? For 30 years.
That's it.
Yeah. It's interesting to see him at events because I'll be with him and chiefs come up to him and remember when they were reserves. And he was a TAC officer when I was a reserve many years ago as well. I also have 2 other reserve officers that, on top of patrol, they also dedicate their time to the heliport and have received quite a bit of training and are tactical flight observers up there and are there at least once a week on top of their once-a-week rides and patrol. So they do dedicate a lot of their time and effort into this program. They really care about it. And as you can see, many have been here for the long haul. With that, I'd like to introduce the ones I have here. Bill Torley, who's been here 33 years. Armin Kazanjian, been here about 15 years. And Steve Kosis and Nick Anderson, who both graduated in June. What I also wanted to include is they all have varying degrees of backgrounds and professions. Nick, he's a student, also works full-time. Steven, he's a city employee, works for one of the other divisions in the city. Armin's a business owner, and I also have some of my other reserves that are, one's a fire marshal for the state, several other self-employed business owners, students, an attorney, 3 that are dispatchers for us as well. So varying degrees of backgrounds.
John, you wouldn't qualify.
I know.
Don't even think about it. That is just unbelievable. I mean, I don't know if the public quite understands the commitment, and it just blows my mind every time I think about it. That I know a lot of these guys that they have full-time work businesses that they run, and they go through the entire training. They go through all of that for basically the volunteer work that they're doing for the cities. There's no, I can't put a value on that. I cannot put a word to describe that. I think how lucky we are. And I think also it's to the credit of the police department also that in the past several years, you guys have gone out there and started recruiting more and more. So I think when I attended the graduation and I saw all these, it just, there's no way I can describe how proud that we are in the community to see, we get to go home and sleep at nights while these volunteers go out there and actually, put their life on the line. I don't know how to describe that. I don't know. I applaud you guys, and I applaud the police department for everything you guys have done, and also other departments. I think this is an excellent program for them to consider incorporating, and even the fire department. I'm sure this is something that we've talked about that we can try to implement, because what a great way to be able to have these individuals come through the program, train, and then hopefully with the opportunity when openings do happen, you guys can hire them on a full-time basis. It's just a win-win situation all around, and I applaud you guys for what you've done. It's just there's no words that I can tell you that describes how we feel as the community and how lucky we are to have people like you guys commit to this program.
You're absolutely correct. It's a wonderful stepping stone. I myself started out as a reserve and used it to become full-time. And I know many of the ones that graduated in June are using that as well. And we do have, though, the career reserves that are actually our backbone and
Absolutely.
stay here. And they're the ones that we use to develop the newer ones, newer reserves.
And the other thing is, I don't think people quite realize that the reserves go through the same exact training. They go through the entire process, and in return get paid $1 a year. I mean, it's not. It's just. Again, I applaud you guys. I'm sure my fellow commissioners also have some comments and questions.
That's a very nice election speech. Maybe you're running for city council
No,
here.
no. I thought you liked me. What did I do to you? No, I mean, it's just...
Mr. Gantasev, yeah. Congratulations and thank you. In the meantime, while you're there, I don't know you can do that or Chief DePompa can do that, to explain to the public exactly about this reserve program, a very short that encouragement to the public that they can in the future, people can come and say maybe some people they would like to apply for this program or how do they apply? I mean, what is the system? How is the work? Because this is an opportunity, I mean, all these years, this is the first time which I've seen that this program is effective. And
how many years has it been around?
It's been around almost 45 years.
45 years. It's amazing.
so maybe exposure is not enough. So I would like to see if we can expose it more to the public and young generation, maybe to Glendale College or schools or, any places. Definitely, please, if you
Yes,
can
sir.
do that. With your permission, Chief.
Absolutely.
I'm the contact if anyone would like to apply.
Yeah, please mention your name because
Yes, sir.
people are watching, so that you are the person in charge, your name and telephone number, that people can call you, and whoever would like to apply to this job, what is just very short explanation.
Yes, sir. As I said, my name is Sergeant Kevin Dazan, and I'm the current reserve coordinator, and the number I can be contacted at is 818-548-3124. And the process to become a reserve is very simple. You just give me a call. I will set up a personal appointment with that individual and go over the process and the requirements. And all it is, the process is exactly as it is for a full-time officer. They're required to take a written exam, a physical agility test, an oral interview, and then we go into backgrounds and medical and psychological. It's a great program if someone is interested in volunteering to the community, as some are, as career reserves. Also, it's an excellent program if someone wants to be hired on and get their foot in the door to go full-time as a police officer. As I said, right now the program is cut right down the middle, 7 who are career reserves and 7 who do want to go full-time. So we're always looking for more bodies, more individuals to donate their time and be involved as we lose them to go on to become full-time officers.
Absolutely. Fantastic.
Well, I'd like to echo what my colleague said, especially Mr. Minucci, and I think he said it all as far as being proud and thankful for gentlemen of your caliber to volunteer like that. I had an opportunity a number of years ago to volunteer as a civilian with the police department, and it was a fantastic experience. I really enjoyed it. I thought I was putting in a lot of hours when I did it, but when I hear what you gentlemen are doing, it puts me to shame as far as the commitment you have to have your full-time jobs and your other activities, and to want to put your lives on the line for Glendale citizens on top of that. I think it's outstanding, and my hat's off to all of you. And thank you very, very much.
If you have any questions of them, I'd love to let them speak as well.
Absolutely. If you guys don't mind, come on up to the mic and introduce yourselves, and especially Bill. How many years again?
I've been a reserve here for 33 years, since 1977.
Very nice.
And what do you give us your name?
Bill Torley.
And you do what?
Obviously I'm a reserve. I worked in the electrical construction industry for a number of years. I'm semi-retired, and I have a consulting business.
Fantastic.
33 years.
Armin.
So you've gotten $33 of my tax dollars. Is that?
Yes, sir.
Divide that by however many millions. That's what, maybe less
John,
than
you
a
don't
penny.
pay taxes. Don't
I may add, I've spent every nickel of it.
Okay, Armin, come on up. And by the way, Armin is the guy who's responsible for my involvement with the police department, with the city. So my wife is cussing at you for years.
So are we. What does that mean?
Well, blame him for it.
The wife is less angry than we are, for goodness sake.
My name is Armin Kazanjian. I've been a reserve for 17 years now, and I'm a small business owner.
I've known Armin since we were 12 years old and from Boy Scouts. That's where we met.
Armin, that's too bad. I had more respect for you before I found that out.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Kozis, and I've been on the Reserve Force since June of this year. And I'm also a city employee. I've been with the city over 8.5 years. And I've been through a number of departments and divisions. And this is another one to add to my roster. And I'm happy to be part of the Reserve Unit.
Fantastic. And you just graduated, correct?
Yes, sir.
I attended your ceremony. Fantastic.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Anderson, and I was also in the last class I graduated in June. And I go to school, almost done with my associate's degree, and I work at In-N-Out for my living right now.
Okay. And who's your dad?
Sergeant Anderson.
Okay.
Aha.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for...
How come I didn't get to say anything?
Oh, you didn't?
Thank you.
Sorry, John. All right. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Revised class specification for approval, telecommunications series.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is a revision of the class specification series for the telecommunications series. It is a revision. We have had a series for a while, and it was last revised in 2004. However, in the last, I would say, year or two, we have added the telecommunications supervisor classification, and we're thus including that within the series. As with many positions within the IT field, these specifications should be revised every couple of years, ideally every 2 to 3 years, the way technology is. But it's been 6 years for this one. And what you see in this revision is just a lot of changes in the technology that have been occurring in the last few years. You see references to voicemail systems and voice response systems and automated call distribution systems, things like that, which are constantly evolving technologies. And again, as we go out and recruit for these positions, we want to make sure our specifications address all of those latest updated technologies. So with that, this item is here for your approval. Today we have Eric Brum, who's Information Services Administrator for our Information Services Department, and Russ Kwan for my staff, who worked on the specification. So if you have questions, be happy to try and answer them.
Gentlemen, any questions? Yes, sir.
Did you say, Mr. Doyle, that we already have a classification for the telecommunications supervisor? Or is this a new position being added?
This is a classification that was recently added. To my knowledge, it did not exist previously. I could be wrong. But it hasn't been filled until this point. So we're seeking.
We are not adding. We're not putting a new position into this classification, or we are.
I know there's an intent. Maybe someone can assist me on this.
I know my position on creating new positions, so I need to know that answer.
I know there's an intent to fill a supervisory position. I'm not sure if it's a newly budgeted position or if it's a reallocation of some other position within the
Mr. Kwan.
IT
Mr.
department.
Chair, members of the Commission, this position was added to the salary schedule a couple years ago, but it wasn't on the class specification. It was just recently added, probably about a month ago.
So now in the IT, we're going to have the administrator who supervises the supervisor, who supervises the senior technician, who supervises the technician. Is that
correct? It'll be a total staff of.
How come we only have 4 levels? Why don't we add another 2 or 3 levels? That was rhetorical. I just think, you know how I feel about adding positions. I don't see it. I don't necessarily see a need, but we're not budgeting it. So, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, but we do have the budget for it. Is that correct?
No, we don't budget.
We don't.
We don't know. I know, but in case the position is being filled, the money is there.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Gregorian?
Yes.
Gantis?
Yes.
Manukian.
Yes. What's next?
Job bulletin for approval, police officer recruit promotional.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a job bulletin for your approval. It's for the police officer recruit. This being a public safety promotional recruitment process, it is required to be brought to the Commission as if we were doing a police sergeant exam or a police lieutenant exam or a fire captain exam. Per the rules, these all come to you. This is a bulletin to fill some police officer recruit positions, and we're doing this on a promotional basis, and we've been able to fill a lot of our recruit positions by utilizing cadets, CSOs, reserves in this process. And what we're looking at is to open up this bulletin upon your approval and enable us to go out and do an internal promotional recruitment. And as you see, there's a slight modification to the promotional eligibility for this. And this is another reason this is being brought to you, which would enable the reserves, if they're at the level 1 or 2, to qualify regardless of their time in grade. As you just recently heard, we have 2 or 3 that just recently graduated. They went through the entire academy, and this action would enable them to qualify on a promotional basis for a salaried police officer recruit position. So with that, if you have questions, again, Chief DePompa is still here, and Russ Kwan from my staff and other members of the police.
Okay. Yes, sir.
John was first. Go ahead. I just have a couple of questions, mainly academic in nature. Where you say police officer recruit, when I hear the word recruit, that sounds like an entry-level position.
That's correct.
And I'm curious as to why it's promotional if it's entry-level.
We've utilized this process on a promotional basis to transition some people from CSO positions, from cadet positions. It's been part of our outreach recruitment process where we've gotten very, very good, eligible hourly employees and enabled them that transition from part-time to full-time. We've even taken some dispatchers and people along those lines. There's really 2 methods of filling these recruit positions. We do an open recruitment and end up with hundreds of applications.
Okay.
In this case, the department believes we have a number of qualified people internally who would make that transition very easily, probably some of whom are sitting in this room here. And that would be our intent, rather than to open up a huge process with the usual hundreds of applicants we would expect to get, particularly in this economy.
Okay, so if you have a list of applicants from open recruitment and then a list from the internal, is that list combined so that people from the outside as well as the internal people are all coming off the same list?
Commissioner Devine, according to the rules, a promotional list takes priority over an open list. And to my knowledge, we don't have an open list at this point. We have not been hiring police officers. It's been over a year, I believe, and thus we've not had the need to do a recruitment. So right now what we would do in this is create a promotional list, and if we have a sufficient number to fill whatever vacancies we currently have, we'd probably end it there. If we don't have enough to fill, then we would do an open recruitment process. And Chief DePompa has approached the dais. So.
And Mr. Chair, if I might just have a moment to reiterate on Matt's explanation that the promotional process to police officer recruit is also a critical strategy for how we achieve our diversification goals within the department. And it's really a long-term process in that we get young people from our community involved early on in our Explorer program, and then those youngsters transition on into part-time work as cadets while they're completing their schoolwork, and we do this in conjunction both with Hoover High School that runs the Public Safety Academy to get kids interested and on a career track for law enforcement and fire service. And then that continues on with Glendale College in the Fire Service and Administration of Justice. But it's these youngsters, these students that ultimately fill our ranks of explorers and cadets, and we get them integrated into the organization at a very early age and progress them through part-time employment. And then it provides a very short, fast-track route to get them into the ranks of police officer. So they'll come in, and from cadet, some will go into the reserve ranks or work as a community service officer in a variety of different areas within the department. But nonetheless, then it allows us to achieve our diversity goals much more effectively than we ever have before by utilizing this long-term strategy. So it's a very important tool for us and works very well.
Two more quick questions. I was curious also, you're eliminating the 6-month requirement or 1,240 hours for the police.
600 hours. That was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the other, the 600 hours for the police reserves. And my question is, why wouldn't we eliminate the time requirement also for the other groups, the community service officer, police communications officer? What is the rationale for still requiring them to have this amount of time and not requiring the reserve officers to have it?
Matt, did you want to?
Go ahead, Chief.
Just a clarification, I wanted to make sure, at least my understanding of it, the reserves already have gone through the training versus the cadets. And does that make sense?
That is correct.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
They're fully trained peace officers.
They can hit the ground running.
The others are not. These the cadet, the CSO, communications. They're not sworn officers, and thus would require a lot more training.
Time. Okay.
A lot more
And the
time.
last question, I think you've answered that under the selection procedure where it talks about the physical agility test, the background investigation, and the medical psychological examinations, again, the reserves have already completed those 3 aspects of it, so they would not be required to go through that again, I'm assuming.
That is correct.
Okay.
Actually, to follow up, Chief, on that question, I just want to get a clarification for myself. It is my understanding that the reserves go through the same hiring process with the psych, with the physical, with the written, with the background. My question is, when you decide to hire them on a full-time basis, are you still requiring them to go through all of that again?
Mr. Chair, they may not have to go through all of it. But there may be certain abbreviated steps that they'll have to take to, for example, refreshing a background investigation such as that. Very likely that they'd have to go through a medical examination again. But it does expedite the process of moving them from volunteer or part-time into the full-time capacity.
Okay, so they don't, so they don't necessarily have to go through, because to me, the part that doesn't make sense is when we go and spend all this money, we do the background, as long as we're not paying them, we're okay with. But the minute we want to start paying them, now all of a sudden we're putting them through the whole process again. But from what I'm hearing from you, that is not necessarily the case?
That is correct. It's an expedited or abbreviated process. And a lot of it depends, too, on the amount of time that they've served in that capacity, how recently they've been through the battery of tests to include the background investigation. But regardless, the net effect is that the process is abbreviated and we can expedite them into the permanent positions that way.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
One last question. Is there anything that a full-time sworn paid police officer can do that a reserve cannot do?
Well, yes, there are certain requirements set forth by the state, the Peace Officer Standards and Training, that defines what a reserve can do based on their level of training at a particular time. In terms of enforcing the laws and having the same peace officer authority, it's identical. But before a reserve officer can actually go out and function as a solo patrol officer without a partner, That will depend upon reaching certain thresholds in terms of training and experience.
And
For all
just
intent and purposes, they're pretty much the same.
Thank you.
and just a clarification, we're talking about level 1.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Because from my understanding, there are a couple of different levels of reserves, but we currently have the level 1 and the level 2, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Not a question. I want to. I'm excited that we're removing the 6-month and 600-hour on the reserve police officers. I think we've applauded their work, and we obviously have long-term people here and some short-term people. And with their training, I think the idea, and just Mr. Devine, the whole idea of this was hatched a long time ago with the cadet program. And the cadet program has proven to be a huge success as our city has grown and grown in terms of its population and changed in terms of the population. And the cadet program, because we've met them, we've been able to bring in many young people, and this gives them that fast track to get into the police department. We've promised them that. We trained them. We did that with Hoover High School, and we're doing that now. And the same goes for the reserve officers. I enthusiastically support this request.
Absolutely. Chief, while we have you up here, I want to again congratulate you and your department for all the recruits as far as the reserves and all the improvements that the public sees on your department. Congratulations for the fine job that you guys and your command staff is doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we appreciate your support and the support of the Commission.
And with that, I would move for approval.
Second.
May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Gregorian?
Yes.
Menuchyan?
Yes. What's next?
Resolution, request to declare certain positions unclassified.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is a request to declare 2 positions unclassified, and this is within the Commission's authority to do so. This is something we don't do very often. We don't like to declare any of our positions unclassified. What it means to be unclassified is that they are essentially not non-civil service, and should funding be eliminated for the position, the individuals could be let go without any recourse or any rights of appeal. We're asking to do this for 2 newly established classifications and positions that we're going to be filling soon. One is for a DNA laboratory supervisor, the other for a DNA specialist. These 2 positions will be staffing a regional DNA lab that the police department has obtained a federal grant for, something that they've worked very hard in working with our local congressmen and other city officials to develop this laboratory, which is going to be within the police department building. And it's something that the department is quite proud of, and hopefully it'll be a showcase for other agencies. Again, the item before you tonight is to look at the 2 positions that we're going to be utilizing to staff this lab and have them declared unclassified as we go out to recruit for them. Upon your approval, we are, I think, pretty anxious to go out and begin the recruitment very quickly. And we will advertise it as such, so all the candidates will be aware of that fact. Other than the fact that they will be unclassified, these individuals will be treated, all the same as far as pay, benefits, other rights, privileges that they would enjoy as city employees. The only difference being unclassified. So with that, be happy to answer any questions. And once again, Chief DePompa is here, Captain Nikolaevson is here, and Sergeant Abrahamian is here. They're all very excited about this opportunity, and I know they would like to go out and hire at least the supervisor as soon as possible to get this project going.
Didn't we already do this? I remember, I think it was about a month ago, that we already went through this entire process for these 2 positions, and
It was approximately a month ago, you approved the class specification.
Okay.
Again, Mr. Kwan put a specification together, and that was kind of the first stage in figuring out, what the duties would be and the minimum requirements.
So I'm not
and
hallucinating.
No, you're not hallucinating at all.
There you are.
And there was some discussion about, when we ultimately fill the positions and how we're going to do so. So this did come up, but we do need commission action to go ahead and declare them as unclassified positions. So,
Mr. Devine.
A couple of three questions. First of all, why wasn't the 3-year review period included in the resolution on this item that the chief's memo indicated should be done?
Yeah, I saw that too.
He said, under the recommendation from the chief, he indicated that, let's see here, that due to the limited duration of the initial funding sources, the police department recommends that the positions be hired as salaried, unclassified, and that unclassified status be reviewed in 3 years. And that wording, unless there was a reason for it, doesn't appear in the resolution that would approve this. So that was my first question.
Chairman?
Yes.
That was precisely my question and what Ms. Varpetian and I have been working on, looking at the charter. There doesn't appear to be authority to limit the duration as much as I think it should be. Let's go back in history, and I know Mr. Doyle knows this is it's unique, or not unique. It's interesting that we're bringing it up tonight, because the unclassified and the hourly positions were a very, very important part of Mr. Coleman's contribution to this commission, and his concern that at the time that we started reviewing these, we had unclassified positions that had been in place for 20 years with no rhyme or reason. So I was very concerned about that fact that we create a position that we don't review. And so we've kind of been looking at that, and I didn't necessarily agree with the chief. I thought maybe we would put a 5-year position on it. But it doesn't appear that the charter allows that, and I'm not sure that we would have a mechanism, because if we terminate the position, I just don't know that we can do that. Even though it was recommended by the chief, I don't think we have the authority, much as I'd like to do that. However, I'd like it maybe noted somewhere that in the file that this should be brought back to the commission. I would think, if this is we're anticipating a 4-year grant, is that correct, Chief?
Mr. Gantis, that is correct. We anticipate that the funding will allow us to operate the lab for about a 4 to 5 year period.
So I just don't see that it's not in the rules. All we can do is either put them as classified or
let's
unclassified.
first ask the chief, is that something that you wanted in there?
Well, I think our intent on that is that at the 3-year mark, we'd have a much better idea about the future of the lab, whether or not it's going to be self-sustaining, whether there'll be additional funding sources, and at that point, whether there needed to be a change in classification of the employees.
Okay.
So at the 3-year mark, we're going to have a very, very clear picture of that.
Okay. Mrs. Vartaped.
Mr. Chair, you can give us direction to bring this back in 3 years, and we can do so to reconsider this.
Well, if we do that, do we have the ability then to change the positions to classified?
Yes.
In 3 years.
You have that authority.
You have that authority. You either make a position classified or unclassified. So if it came back in 3 years, you can't just make this, I don't think, a 3-year unclassified position, but you can direct it be brought back for the purpose of reviewing whether it should remain unclassified or become a classified.
Well, that was actually the wording in the chief's memorandum.
I think he wanted to make it a 3-year position, but I don't think...
No, he said the status be reviewed in 3 years, which is
exactly
what you just said we could do, and I believe Matt said confirm that. So would it be possible to put into the resolution that it be brought back?
Is that okay?
Can we 3 years for review, not for changing the classification?
I think you're asking that we just bring it back to you in a 3-year period. We can certainly do that.
But can that be in the resolution?
I don't see a problem with us putting it in the resolution that you require to bring it back, not that the classification has a lifetime of a 3-year period.
For review in the way the
Correct.
chief suggested.
Okay. And you have the verbiage that how you want
Classification is not
to...
going to be any problem.
When you make the motion, you want to incorporate that in?
We may then decide to
Okay.
continue it as unclassified or make it a classified. It comes back to whether or not it remains classified or unclassified. or remains
Okay, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I have two more, if I
Please,
may.
go ahead.
What is the process for changing unclassified to classified? Let's say it comes back in 3 years and the chief recommends,
good
based
question.
on, he got $5 million grant to continue the program, he wants to classify these people.
Yeah.
What is the procedure?
The same procedure that we're going through tonight. We would essentially update this resolution and remove these classifications from that list.
Okay, but
And they
the
would no
people that
longer-
are in the position, let's say he has the two people in the unclassified position, would they have the ability to change over to classified and stay in that position? Or
Yes.
do you have to go through a exam process? And
No.
They would get the position, but
They
they
would
would
get the
then
position.
be classified.
That's what we did, Mr. Chairman. That's what we did when we changed, what was it, 166 positions that we changed 5 or 6 years ago from unclassified to classified. We just made the positions. Everybody stayed the same job.
Okay, and the last question, are unclassified positions subject to probation? In other words, if the chief hires two people in these unclassified positions and there's some problem that may arise, does the chief, the appointing authority, and/or the human resources have the ability to, let's say, deal with these or discipline these people through a probationary type process?
Commissioner Devine, in reality, an unclassified position is always on
Always
probation.
probationary.
They are at will. And what we would do, and what I believe we do with our staff, and with Debbie Mallon and the performance evaluation process, is that we hire these individuals, and they get put on the same schedule as other salaried classified employees as far as their performance evaluations. And they're served with the same performance evaluation, except that evaluation won't say probationary evaluation. It'll just say 3-month evaluation, but there are no civil service rights conferred upon them after X number of days. They're essentially at will for the whole duration.
And they
So-
don't have civil service protection.
That's correct.
But let's be clear, they have everything else. They get every other benefit that an
I understand
employee
that.
gets.
I understand.
Well, when you say they get the health and...
Everything.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Okay, correct.
Okay, any other questions? Gentlemen, you want to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, well, we have to make the modifications.
Yeah, with the provision that the resolution be
Why don't you
amended.
make the
Well, I'll-
motion? Or make the modification
Okay,
accordingly?
I would modify the motion to include wording in the resolution that...
Excuse me, Mr. Devine, the council's already prepared
Okay,
something.
well,
Should we
that-
just have her read it in?
Please, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. but
It's okay.
Good.
I would propose that we add a third paragraph after DNA specialist that provides the following, that the chief examiner provide a report to the Civil Service Commission reviewing the unclassified status of the employees in a time not to exceed 3 years.
Is that what
Yeah, I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine,
Yes.
Gregorian,
Yes.
Cantus.
Yes.
Menuchyan.
Yes. What's next?
Report on hourly employment.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a report on hourly employment. We do this report twice a year, once at the midpoint of the fiscal year and once at the conclusion. And this is the report that addresses the hourly employment as it pertains to the fiscal year 09-10. If you recall, and I know there were, well, I was going to say a couple of you on the Commission back in 2005, I guess that means we have one, one remaining. The Commission took a great deal of interest in the, what I would say, the proliferation of hourly positions throughout the city. And with good reason, I think. We were seeing many departments as a means of saving costs, really hiring a lot of people on an hourly basis as opposed to through the normal salaried, benefited means. And I think the Commission had had some very, very good input relative to that process and possible abuse of a situation. At that time, the Commission made a series of requests, of which staff followed through working with the city manager's office, essentially to try to reduce the number of hourly positions that were working in a full-time or near full-time capacity. And the staff report goes through some of those efforts and talks about the prohibition of hourly employees working over 1,250 hours in a fiscal year. We updated the administrative policy relating to hourly employees to address that. We have regular reports being put out by our finance department or payroll department addressing hourly employees who are approaching that 1,250-hour threshold. And with that, we've as part of this, we've made this a regular report to the Civil Service Commission, where we actually report the number of hourly positions that have exceeded 1,250 hours in a given fiscal year. And in addition to that, we've identified some of the positions that were exempted, because there are a number of these that are exempted from the 1,250-hour rule for a variety of reasons. And then there are some who are not exempted that we have determined to be non-compliant. If you look at the chart on page 2 of the report, you will see, generally a lower number of hourly positions working over the 1,250 hours, starting from 0304 to 0405, gradually getting smaller and smaller. And what you see is, again, a smaller number, and the figure underneath that relates to those that that are non-compliant for one reason or another, that have exceeded 1,250 hours without the necessary approvals from the city manager's office. So, with that, I mean, to sum this up, it's again I think we continue to show a long-range trend of reducing these situations of employees working over 1,250 hours, and we'll continue to be as vigilant as possible in making sure that we keep it at that level for the years to come. So, if you have any questions, be happy to try and answer them.
Okay. Commissioner Gantis.
Yes, I have a couple comments and some questions. First and foremost, this also was a program that was spearheaded by Commissioner Coleman, and it's been an outstanding thing. Just so my fellow commissioners understand, this is a position similar to unclassified, except in the unclassified, they're full-time positions with full benefits. Hourly are just that, hourly, no benefits, and we had an inordinate number of people working hourly where we're getting no benefits. Mr. Coleman brought this up, and we worked, as he said, diligently with the full cooperation of the city manager's office, and particularly our newest, what is she, the assistant city manager now, Yasmin Beers? I haven't congratulated her yet, but she should be. In her work, that we put this down to where it is. Having said that, Mr. Doyle, I'm looking at the Public Works Department, and I'm particularly concerned because we have people that are doing exactly what we worked on, getting close to full-time, and a couple of them were for particular projects. But I note, for instance, the office service specialist that's been there for 4 years, due to a staff shortage, that's working more than full-time, because it's 2,041.5 hours. Well, that's not more. That's just about full-time. And then we have 2 of them that are working more than full-time. I personally wonder whether or not these positions ought to be re-looked at. I note the smart grid project for the GWP is okay, but I'm particularly concerned about Public Works. There are a lot that are there, and a lot that have been doing it for 2 or 3 or 4 years. I don't know what the process would be. I'd maybe like to know whether or not we should be considering. I'm particularly concerned about that office services specialist that's there just due to a staff shortage. Is that because there's a freeze, or what? I mean, I think those.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gantis, it's a good question, and as we compile this list each year, we do come across situations like that that do look like they need to be addressed, and that is one. The office services specialist 2 is one that we will be addressing shortly. And what the situation we have there is an individual working in a essentially a clerical capacity, but for a number of years in what appears to be a full-time capacity. And so I was speaking with Ms. Fitzpatrick from the Public Works Department this morning asking about that, and she said there is a request in to convert that position to a salaried position. Again, these are tough times as far as each department's budgets are really, really being hammered. Public Works has probably been hit as hard as any department because most of their positions are general fund, which is where we're hurting the most. But Ms. Fitzpatrick did convey to me that they have a request in. What they're going to end up doing is having to reallocate a vacant salaried position in another area to fund that, hopefully as a salaried position, and they're going through that process right now. So hopefully we'll be able to pick up that individual as a salaried basis. The other two in Public Works, you see there are two that have exemptions, a City Resource Specialist, 1 and 2, for a CIP project. That project is the off-ramp, they called it the flyover or the Fairmont Bridge, whatever. Again, these are individuals that are working exclusively on that project. There's a grand opening ceremony in a few weeks for the Fairmont Bridge, so it should be coming to an end. So it is our belief that it's the last time that we're going to see
Some
that.
of those homeowners over there would not necessarily agree with it coming to an end. They might use the word beginning, but go ahead.
But, that's where those two CIP project positions are addressing. So again, as the one thing that this report does point out is areas that we do need to certainly follow up with departments. And again, Ms. Beers is pretty vigilant on this. She used to be a very popular person, and now she's having to say no to a lot of departments on these types of matters, and it's very hard because departments have work to do. They need staff. They don't care if it's salaried, hourly. They just need to get certain things done. But again, with regard to those Public Works, those are areas that are being addressed, and hopefully we will not see them next year.
A couple questions. Actually, John answered most of them through his experience with this for many years, but I was just curious, first of all, where does the 1,250 hours come from? Why is that a magic number?
It's a threshold that I think when we were discussing, it's roughly about 25 hours a week.
Okay.
We felt that was fair.
So it's not a magic
We had
number.
many suggestions. I think it was 1,500 was one, and we were concerned that was too high. Then there was I remember 1,000 hours. That would have been half-time, and we thought that might be just a little bit too low. So it was really kind of a negotiated figure amongst the 5 commissioners. We spent a lot of time on this.
Okay. And what is the union's position on this issue? Because I'm assuming the hourly employees are not within the union, so they don't have the membership there.
They like what we're doing because if we create a full-time position, then it goes into then they become a member of the GCEA.
So there's not a problem then?
I think it's quite the opposite. I think they're very thrilled. They were here with us working on it. This was a very collaborative effort. We have a wonderful staff, and Yasmin was really on top of it. I really applauded her for that.
And then again, I'll ask Mr. Ganis this question, based on your experience in putting this together and you're seeing this report, and other than the items you specifically mentioned, you believe that the intent of the program is being met on what you see here?
I think, other than what I've mentioned and Matt pointed out, and Matt picked it up too, that there's just a little slippage here. Public Works maybe a little bit. There are also, like for instance, the ones in information services on PeopleSoft. PeopleSoft is a highly complicated system, and so that I didn't bring that up because that makes sense. And once they're done with PeopleSoft and it's implemented, then those people probably go on. That's the purpose of this. And most of those people are generally consultants that want to be hourly. They don't want to be full-time. But overall, I think this has been a fabulous program. Because of our efforts and Yasmin's efforts, they've stayed on top of this and made sure that we're not doing anything other than what we have to do. As you can see, most of the hourlies are like the lifeguards, the people that work in the parks. These are truly hourly jobs that need to stay as hourly jobs. But we catch like this one, the office services specialist too. And I noticed, I was appreciative that Matt had picked it up, and so we have to stay vigilant on it. But yes, the purpose of this program has been, as you can see from over the last 5 years, it's gone from about 194 down to 60. We've really been very, very good at it.
Any other questions? Okay, do we need to note and file, or do we need to take action?
Note and file, I think.
Okay, note and file.
Before we move on, I want to thank Alex Soto. He's the gentleman there in the middle who prepared this report. It's very painstaking, chasing down a lot of these positions, and he did a lot of work on it and did a very nice job. So
thank you, sir.
Compliment Alex.
Okay, what's next?
Report on reinstatement process.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this item is an item that Commissioner Devine brought up, I believe, at our last meeting or one of the meetings in July, relative to our reinstatement process. Commissioner Devine directed us to explore potential modifications to how we handle our reinstatements. Currently, as you well know, any reinstatement request that comes through is brought to the Commission and it's dealt with in closed session. Commissioner Devine, again, with the concurrence of the full Commission, questioned whether or not this method could be changed to where, in many cases, these end up being pretty non-controversial. The Department is desirous of getting the person back. Human Resources has no issues with it. The employee wants to come back, and I think he asked a very valid question: why does this need to come before the Commission? And what we've done in the report is really to explore whether or not the Charter and the rules actually require the Commission to approve these. A reading of the Charter, or a quick review of the Charter in Article 24 would indicate that really, no, the Commission does not have to approve reinstatements. All the Commission is required to do is adopt rules relating to reinstatement. When it gets to the review of the rules, however, the rules do clearly state that the Commission does have the authority and has to approve reinstatement requests for employees. So if the Commission is desirous of any change to that policy, we would simply need to amend the rules, which, as you well know, we're sort of in the process of doing that right now. And I can simply add this to the laundry list of things that were being considered. Again, we're open to whatever suggestion the Commission has. There are a number of different options we can do to pursue this. We can leave things as they are, or we could throw the entire process to staff as far as just making it an administrative process. Or I think there's an option here, sort of a middle ground, to where we could have staff approve these administratively. However, if there's well, for lack of a better term, a controversial element of it where the Department doesn't recommend that someone be reinstated, we could give that applicant for reinstatement the rights to appeal that to Commission, which would be similar to the role the Commission has in a number of other areas. So with that, that's more or less a background of the issue and options, and I'll throw it to the Commission to see how they want to address.
Mr. Devine.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of tell my colleagues where I was coming from when I suggested this possible change. And first of all, I want to compliment Matt or your staff, whoever wrote the report. I think it's very comprehensive and certainly captured the essence of where I was coming from, and I appreciate it very much. After hearing many reinstatement cases, with my colleagues, as Matt said, I was left with the question of, why are we hearing these when it's been approved by the appointing authority, by several levels of management, and by the Director of Human Resources? It seemed like we were just doing something that had already been done and really didn't carry much weight. I shared these concerns with several of my colleagues, and they too had the same questions. So based on that, I did a little research and came up with 3 goals that I wanted to accomplish in this particular action. First one was to make sure that the Commission maintained its role of ensuring that employees' rights were protected in these types of matters. And I think Matt addressed that by mentioning the several options we had where we could just turn the whole thing over to staff and let them do it. Or the second option would be where an employee is not granted reinstatement rights by management or appointing authority, that they would then have the right to appeal to this commission, and we would hear it as we do any of the other disciplinary actions that we are involved with. So I felt that that goal was met and that we would still be able to ensure the employees' rights were protected while relieving ourselves of some what I call repetitive or possibly unnecessary duties. Second goal I had was to make sure that the charter didn't require us to do this. And as Matt pointed out, and as Ms. Varpetian mentioned, and I think she wrote that part of the report, that the charter does not require us to hear all of the reinstatement cases. And finally, my goal was to really streamline the process and relieve the commissions and staff from unnecessary work. Plus, there's another item there about, I call it saving the trees. I don't know if you guys remember when we get these packages, sometimes when we have employees that have excellent history of work, there's pages and pages that they copy, 5 copies for us, plus heaven knows who else. So that, there's possibly close to 100 pages of paper that are expended for us just to say we agree with management. So with that background, I would ask comments from my colleagues and hope that they would concur in a possible rule change.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I assume this only talks about reinstatement, not the similar qualifications transfer. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Well, my position is that while I understand Mr. Devine's concern, I still think the Civil Service Commission offers a level of protection for the citizens to the public workforce, and I know that generally when we hear these, at least when Commissioner Abkarian was on there, he started it, and I think it's a great question is to know why they are coming back and whether or not they're going to be a devoted employee. And I think that's our job as a commission. I understand your concern, Mr. Devine, and I understand that we have a wonderful staff. I'm not questioning the staff, but I think that we have, particularly in these times when public employment is coming under a great deal of attack, the theory is that the commissioners who answer to the city council, who answer to the people, are the line of communication. And while it is somewhat of a inconvenience, there aren't that many cases. We've had a few. I wouldn't say there's an inordinate amount that we can't. We could continue to review these. I don't think they take a lot of time, and I think we get to then have the employee face us and know that the people have had a voice in whether or not he or she is returning to the public service. So I don't necessarily see a need to change the process. However, I don't think it's earth-shattering if we did, with the exception of where there's a disagreement among the staff or whether they decline to do that. I think there should be a right to appeal, but I wouldn't call it similar to a disciplinary proceeding, because then that brings in the whole civil service. I think they have a right to appeal similar, I would think, Matt, to the right of a medical disqualification, but not the same second opinion, that kind of stuff, but just that, so that they could come here and be heard. It would not be a closed session item, I don't think, since they wouldn't be an employee.
No, it would be
No,
a close.
I don't think we hear these, by the way, these reinstatements in
Yes, we do.
We shouldn't be. I guess we shouldn't be, because they're not employees.
It's a public, under the Brown Act, under public employment, you can.
It wouldn't.
Oh, that's because we may be hiring them back.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
That's true. I'm sorry. But then still, it would, I just think that the process as it sits, while it's somewhat archaic, I just think the inconvenience to allow the public to still have its view on this it makes sense. So I would be not in favor of changing it. And Matt, you said we all agreed, I didn't agree then, and what I agreed to is have it reviewed. I'd like to have seen it because it hadn't been reviewed. Everything can be subject to review. I'm not sure it needs to be changed, but if it got changed, it wouldn't bother me with those exceptions.
Commissioner Gregorian.
Well, I agree with Mr. Devine, so whatever he mentioned.
Okay.
Especially the reinstatement, and staff did a very good job, so We don't have to go through the details because basically, according to Mr. Commissioner Gantes, he's going to come back to us again. So
Yeah, I could go either way. I see both sides' point. I see what Mr. Gantes is saying, and I also see what Commissioner Devine is saying.
I believe in that if you can do some kind of a streamlining process.
Yeah, I understand. I could go either way. It's something that I'm with Mr. Gantes. I mean, first of all, I don't think we have too many of these to begin with. How many did we do last year?
I don't think we've had more as the economy has gone down. I think we've had maybe 4 or 5 in the last year. I bet you a total I've looked at 15 maybe over 11 years, 20 maybe. I mean, it just isn't that much.
It's typically 2 to 3 a year.
By any chance, Mr. Chair, is there any way to modify the expression of Commissioner Devine and combine with Mr. Gantes? Something
Well, I think we're all talking about the same thing. First of all, Commissioner Gantes mentioned that he wanted to have the public input, and there is no public input because it's closed session. So,
well, I think he meant us as the public.
We're the representative of the public. That we have. We're another set of eyes.
Right,
yes.
well,
I didn't mean public view.
And we will have that in cases where the employee is denied at any of the levels of review the ability to come back. My feeling is that someone mentioned staff does a great job, and I certainly agree with that. In this case, we have actually 3 levels of staff that look at these things. We have the appointing authority, we have city manager's office, and we have human resources. So to me, I can't see why there needs to be another level of review in there just to say, yeah, we agree with it. And then, again, I agree with Mr. Gantes 100% that we need to be able to protect the employee, and that protection is going to be afforded by having the appeal process in there the way Mr. Doyle indicated. I think that we're going to have our cake and eat it too on this one, and while saving staff, whether it's 1 case, 2 cases, or 3 cases a year, it's still extra time that staff could be doing other things, and we could be doing other things.
Mr. Doyle, what's your take on this? I mean, I'm going to put you in the middle on this.
Hot seat.
And please, Alexei.
Well, from a staff standpoint, I will concur with Commissioner Devine. This would be very beneficial to us, and I didn't even think about the whole issue of saving trees because we do, as you know, prepare a full packet for these reinstatements, and we give you their last 3 years worth of job performance evaluations. Again, I think the major concern, the primary concern of me would be the safeguarding of the rights of the employee. And
absolutely.
If an employee expresses a request for reinstatement and that request is denied at the administrative level,
they can appeal.
As long as they have the right to come before you folks and express their views and make a determination, that would be.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Sorry. I've been reading over some of the rules. One of the issues here is again there is. If the employee were terminated, left, and they have a right to come back within a year, and they left and then they want to come back, one of the rules requirements are that if a list is established for that position and they come back on, they move on to the reinstatement list and have priority. This could be and I think we need to review that. This may then be an issue that the existing employees that are on the list, particularly if it's a promotional, the reinstatement, if I'm not mistaken, takes precedence over the promotional list. Excuse me, they
promotional.
They get on the same list.
They get put back on the same list. They're put back on the same list as the promotional. Yeah, so we're looking at the rules here. If their list is still open.
We went through that on the last one we did, and that very question came up, and the answer was that the person that is asking for reinstatement goes on a reinstatement list, That is behind the promotional list. They have to clear the promotional list before this person is even considered.
Mr. Chair, let me clarify.
We're talking about 5E.
Rule 5, Roman numeral 5, Section 2B addresses the order of list utilization when an appointing authority is to certify names. And the number one priority is the layoff list. The number two priority is promotional list. The number 3 is reinstatement, and 4 is the open list. So a promotional list would take precedence over a reinstatement list, but
Okay.
not an open list.
Sorry. Why don't we go ahead and make a motion?
Okay. Well, I move that we ask Human Resources to amend the civil service rules to delete the requirement for all reinstatement requests to come to the commission, and that only the ones where there is a denial of the reinstatement, they could be
Or there's an
appealed.
appeal.
They could be appealed to the commission. Words to that effect.
Yeah. Do I have a second?
I'm sorry, repeat again, denial of the...
So,
Yep. Please
Basically,
clarify.
it doesn't have to come to us unless it's
Exactly.
appealed. Right?
yes.
Okay. Do we have a second? I'm sorry.
I'm not seconding.
Okay, you're not seconding?
No, but do you agree?
No.
Okay, well, hold on.
We
made a
just don't-
motion. Do we have a second?
Yes, I second.
Okay, can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gregorian?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
No.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, what's next?
Agenda forecast.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, the agenda forecast is before you. We have a couple of things scheduled and upcoming. I'm going to ask on the for the September 8th meeting, I had a conversation with the city attorney last night, the city attorney, Mr. Howard, about he wanted to be at that meeting where the rule amendments are being addressed. He's done some research on one particular item, and he's been kind of advising me on this whole process all along. He's unable to be there on the 8th, and has requested that we move that to the 22nd, if that's acceptable to the Commission,
What was the date he wants to change it?
to the next meeting
Okay.
in September 22nd.
September 22nd.
Yes.
Okay. That's sufficient.
And
That's fine.
Again, in addition to class specifications, bulletins, and other new business, you'll see what we have upcoming for the next few months. And October, we anticipate the activity report, which Ms. Mallon is working on. And also at the meeting on the 22nd, we hope to have specifications on some of the newly reorganized department head positions.
And Mr. Doyle, what I was going to ask you also is, based on the conversation where you and I have spoken, where I would like you to, on one of the available agenda dates, to put on the agenda and come back to this commission basically with a presentation of overall civil service rights that our city employees have, and some of the clarification on the things that can be brought in front of this commission, the things that, just an overall process of what roles we play in the protection of the city employees and the rights that they have through civil service.
Very good.
I would appreciate it if my colleagues are okay with that. I think it'll help some, us and the employees, just to get a refresher on the rights that they have through the civil service process.
So are you suggesting to agendize this?
Yeah, I'm asking Mr. Doyle to come back to us with a report, basically going over the major rights that are covered under civil service that our employees have, what things could be brought in front of us, what, if somebody doesn't agree with a process, or if somebody doesn't agree with the disciplinary action that has been taken against them, what rights do they have, and just the overall process, what role are...
So would you like to be as an information base only?
Yeah, this is just an information base only.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Doyle, we used to have a presentation that we would have for new civil service people, that was included in it, was it not? I
can
think we
dust
need-
that off and see.
Yeah, I think we need to do that, and I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, though, while that can be done, I would recommend, as we all know, and in comments we'll hopefully say this, that Mr. Coleman has submitted his resignation. So theoretically, in the next 2 months, we will have a new member, and at that time, we're going to have 4 members that have less than 2 years experience. Is that right?
This is not about us, John. This is about the employees.
No, but it's
I'm
also
asking-
needs
I understand that, but I'm asking for this, for the employees to understand what rights do they have.
Yeah, but they're not here. The employees get their
I
own.
understand, John, where the employees are or not. This is not about This is not about us. It's not an educational process for us. This is more as a presentation at the civil service to be presented through Channel 6 for the employees to be able to go over and also have an idea. Mr. Doyle knows exactly what I've asked for, and basically he can agendize it and bring it back to coincide with the new commission members. But this is not the intended for the commission. It's mostly for the employees.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask, I think, Mr. Doyle, we need to dust that off then as an additional thing to have that training video come out again for all the newer commissioners as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gantis. Maybe you can come and teach us how to do.
No,
We
this is-
can. I think we can cover it all. So
Yeah.
that'll be good.
I mean, that's
And-
separate then, obviously.
Yeah, and hopefully a new commissioner is appointed in a timely manner, and I think it'd be good for.
Yeah, but I want, again, the focus is I want the employees to understand what rights they have
Okay.
and what can be brought in front of this commission and what cannot be. Okay, any other comments?
Are we on comments?
I'm sorry?
Are we on comments?
Yes, what's next? Actually, let's go to the comments section.
Reports and information.
Okay. Do we have any? None? What's next?
Civil Service Commission and our staff comments.
Okay. Mr. Gantis.
I've already mentioned, Mr. Coleman has submitted his resignation. I wrote an email yesterday back to all the people commenting, and we've seen 2 issues that were near and dear to Mr. Coleman's heart. Without belaboring the subject, I got to speak to him last night. His health is okay, but he's just been having many more procedures and just doesn't feel he can keep up what he needs to do. Sounded good, had a nice conversation with him. Roy was an exceptional member of this commission, brought some very, very important issues to this commission, and was compassionate on those issues. And he was a stellar representative, I believe, of the city of Glendale. He will be missed.
Yeah, I've been talking to Commissioner Coleman for the past several weeks and about this decision of him wanting to resign, and Mr. Coleman and Commissioner Coleman is a phenomenal human being, and I've learned a lot from him, and we were blessed to have him on this commission, and unfortunately his health comes first, and I respect that, and he's an absolute beautiful human being, and just a phenomenal way. His entire thought process, how he goes about making decisions, and I learned a lot, and I will continue, because obviously I will continue all of us will continue our friendship, and we're going to miss him on this board, and hopefully one day maybe we can get him back. Hopefully his health is going to, but I do understand his health coming first, so. Any other comments?
Well, I too would like to comment that I unfortunately haven't had the opportunity to know or work with him as long as my colleagues have. I've just known him for less than a year, but during that time I came to really respect him in terms of his knowledge and his experience. And when we were on cases and deliberations, why his knowledge and background really fit in and helped me to understand a lot of things in terms of civil service rules, procedures, and just in general dealing with other human beings. So I will too miss Roy and his knowledge and his friendship, and I do wish him well and a quick recovery.
Absolutely. Okay. Any other comments? What's next?
There is no closed session. Adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
We're adjourned.